I'm Alan Colmes. I want to welcome Ahmed Rehab. He is CAIR-Chicago's executive director and CAIR's National Strategic Communications Director. The attempted Islamic Center cleared a hurdle today in New York in that they decided not to designate the building a landmark building so that they could move forward with new construction. Ahmed, thank you for coming on. I thought Mayor Bloomberg gave unusual for him, an inspiring speech today.
I agree, and I'm very happy with the outcome of the situation today. I think we're headed in the right direction.
I'm very troubled by the knee-jerk reaction to this, as if people want to make us into the very people who attacked us on 9/11, bigoted, intolerant, not welcoming of other religions, forgetting that we have a First Amendment. I'm sure you experienced a lot of this.
You know, Alan, the problem is that it's not a knee-jerk reaction. What we saw immediately after 9/11 was a somewhat understandable knee-jerk reaction. What we're seeing almost 10 years after is not a knee-jerk reaction, but rather the work of an organized anti-Muslim network that is, opposing the building of mosques, essentially American centers of worship, just like synagogues and churches and every other place of worship in America, and opposing every Muslim person who is either elected or appointed into public office. It's part of a larger issue that we're seeing, and it's as the result of the culmination of the now, problematic anti-Muslim network that's been around for 10 years.
Have Muslims not been at the forefront enough in speaking out and condemning heinous acts and educating people about what the religion is?
Of course we have. The problem is every Muslim of any relevance in this country is accused by these individuals from this anti-Muslim network as being a terrorist. And if it's easily proven that they're not a terrorist, then they're linked to terrorism. And if that can be disproven, then they haven't condemned terrorism. And
I get calls, even last night, hey, CAIR, the people you like so much, they're linked to Hamas. They've got links.
That's the usual line. And if you're not linked and if you've condemned terrorism, then the line becomes, well, you haven't condemned terrorism enough. And then, quote-unquote, enough is such a subjective term that it's impossible to disprove. And that's really the running line.
What is CAIR's relationship with Hamas, with Hezbollah? Is there any?
Zilch. There's no relationship. We're an American civil rights organization. We're Muslims. And because we're Muslims, that link is made. And that's essentially the trouble with this whole ground zero situation with the Islamic Center there. It's that because it's Muslims that are involved, people from the anti-Muslim network keep evoking terrorism. It's not terrorism that is building the center. It's American Muslims.
By the way, it's not a mosque. I mean, there's a mosque there, but mosque is just one component of a much larger entity, correct?
That is precisely right. But, even if it were a mosque, what would be the problem? It's an American center of worship with Americans who are worshiping there. It's not people who are terrorists or who are, anti-American by any means.
Mayor Bloomberg today pointed out that there was a time when Catholics could not pray in New York City. There was a time when Quakers could not. There was a time when they wanted to build a synagogue, back in the 1600s. In this Dutch land called Manhattan, and they didn't want to do it. There was I feel like we're back centuries ago with that kind of ignorance about a religion that hopefully in years to come will be as accepted as any other mainstream religion.
That is exactly right. I mean, the people who are opponents to this Islamic Center are trying to cast this whole situation as a battle between Muslims and non-Muslims, but in reality, it's a battle between Americans, Muslim and non-Muslim, who see this country as a place for all Americans to be treated equally, and those who basically want to set the clock back on us and take us back at a time when certain factions of Americans are just not American enough.
Were the people on those planes on 9/11 Muslims?
They were Muslim, but their ideology is not one that we share. There are people who are Catholic who bomb, abortion clinics. I'm sure.
But that's not being Christian to me. That's not Christianity. That's not what Jesus would have done. That's not. They can call themselves Christians, but they're not Christians.
Precisely. I mean, anybody can call themselves.
Well, that's why I asked you: are these people Muslims who did what they did on 9/11, or are they poseurs?
Well, in my opinion, they're basically acting against the basic tenets of Islam. Now, they claim to be Muslim. But again, myself and the great overwhelming majority of my fellow American Muslims and essentially Muslims around the world see them as terrorists, and that's the reason why they did what they did.
Oklahoma recently passed something. There's some guy. I don't know if they passed. There's some legislator wanted to pass something to ensure that Oklahoma never had Sharia law. I mean, they actually think that American Muslims looking to impose Sharia. What is Sharia law?
Well, Sharia is essentially laws from within the Islamic dogma, and there's the halakha, for example, from the Jewish faith. That's also the Jewish Sharia. There are laws and regulations within Christianity. You can call that Christian Sharia. Sharia in Arabic just means law, and like any other religion, Islam has certain laws that govern personal lives. Now, certain people want to have a political system that is governed by their version of what they think Islam dictates. That's not us. That's not people living in this country, working in this country. But we're accused of that because the anti-Muslim network wants people to believe that we're an ominous, fifth column who are out to trump the Constitution and Islamize, whatever that means, the United States of America, and subject you and everybody else to our laws and regulations, which is not the case, obviously.
How is your it sounds almost like a ridiculous question, but how is your religion different than Christianity or Judaism? In
its very basic sense, it isn't. We believe in God, we believe in doing good, we believe in treating neighbors like we would want to be treated. We believe in, embracing the environment and being good to the environment. It's essentially a body of beliefs that make us do good things.
Well, what makes it different than the other mainstream religions in this country?
There's nothing that makes it any different. It's of the Abrahamic tradition, so it's very similar to Christianity and Judaism.
Muhammad is demonized by people who they call him all kinds of names and say his life was not a holy man's life.
He was a holy man just as Abraham and Moses and Jesus were holy men. He preached essentially the same virtues. The golden rule is essentially the basic rule of Islam. There's been too much politicization of Islam on the part of the terrorists, but also equally so on the part of the anti-Muslims. And in that weird sense, they both converge on their worldview, that there is a schism between Muslims and non-Muslims. It's only the far right that agrees with the bin Laden's view and version of Islam. And that's an irony, Alan, that's lost on many people in this country. These guys believe the same thing that bin Laden does regarding Islam.
Which guys do?
The far right wing,
the far right in this country,
who are basically accusing all American Muslims of being terrorists or linked to terrorism, or that Islam is essentially a religion that is anti-freedom and anti-American Constitution,
and that's what the terrorists believe.
That's what the terrorists believe, and so they're playing right into their worldview. They share the same worldview, and you, myself, and everybody else is stuck between this rock and a hard place, and it's essentially that extremist mentality on both sides that needs to be fought.
Well, to me, fundamentalism is dangerous, whether it comes in the guise of Christianity or Islam or even my own religion, Judaism. Fundamentalism is so inflexible and that leads to intolerance, in my humble view.
And it's a human problem. You'll find it in every faith.
I thank you for coming on with us tonight. I do believe the center will get built. My fear is that because of the hatred, I don't. There was a mosque vandalized in Texas just a couple of weekends ago. I hope we don't see more of that.
Unfortunately, we're seeing several other situations where mosques are, being accused of being other things other than mosques or other than Islamic centers. They're terrorist havens. We're seeing that in Tennessee, other places in New York and Texas and Florida. This is part of a wider spread campaign by this organized anti-Muslim network. And the situation in New York is by no means its own situation. It's part of a larger context.
Sir. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Alan.
And we're coming right back at 877-4-ALAN, 877-367-2526. We are online at alan.com.